Cory, this is an absolute pleasure. I've been looking forward to this for so long. Like, genuinely, it's been a graft trying to get you on, and I'm very, very glad we get to do this, because you are one of the few people that makes my LinkedIn feed enjoyable in the mornings. So I appreciate you. How are you feeling?
No, I'm feeling good. I'm feeling good. Thank you so much for having me on. It's great to be here. Sorry I couldn't make it the last couple of times, but now we're here. We're all ready to go. It's all good.
No, I'm so looking forward to this. Look, we're just gonna cut to the chase. Your LinkedIn is one of the most interesting places to spend time. Yours specifically, right? Because when I think of someone on LinkedIn, I don't think of the type of content you post. You're deliberately, it almost feels anti-LinkedIn approach on LinkedIn, kind of feels paradoxical. Can you just walk me through why?
Yeah, I can walk you through why. 10 years ago, I started my LinkedIn profile, which is absolutely crazy. And so I don't know why I did it. I just heard maybe that LinkedIn was something you do. And so I was like, 22, 21, 22, I was at uni, and I was like, I should have a LinkedIn, right? If I ever need to get a job. And LinkedIn back then obviously was a much more different place. I think, it was unusual. Maybe this was just me, but I think it was quite common across the platform. It was unusual to even add people you didn't know well. So, say for example, you interned with someone, you would add them. But say for example, you studied with someone, it was weird to even add them, right? Like, it was like, why are you adding me on LinkedIn? This is kind of like a personal social network, right? And then it changed, and so people started adding each other, and then automation tools came out. You're thinking like Phantom Buster, one of the big ones, right? And you're just adding everyone under the sun. You're saying, who's a marketer in London? And you're adding like 50,000. And so we got to that stage, and around that time of automation, I don't know if it was because it's the start of the pandemic and everyone's locked inside their house, but people started being a little bit more authentic on LinkedIn. It was less sort of, here's my new job, delighted to work with X number of colleagues, so on and so forth. And it started being a little bit more authentic. And what I mean by authentic is people started talking about their everyday work experience. They talked about their insights when it comes to growth. They said, what does an ideal growth team look like? For example, I saw a lot of those posts when I was first starting out. And also with that, some people started being a little political, which was strange. I
haven't seen political content on LinkedIn for a while.
Yeah. I can't emphasize how strange that was. It used to be the case where you could run an automation and you would like every other post by a person, just or maybe even comment like, that's great insight. This is before the age of AI. This is before the age of ChatGPT. You would literally pre-program message with maybe a customization like first name. Hey, first name, great insight. And like you very quickly couldn't do that anymore. It became a case where some people would post the most unhinged crap imaginable. And obviously around the time of this last election in the US and a couple of elections ago here in the UK, I think it got to a point where everyone was being very, 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 very authentic and political, and it was less a sort of like, I'm LARPing as a professional person, and more as, this is me. Yes, it's my work life, but my work life is my real life as well. And so I tried being a little bit authentic. I've never really tried to be political. I just think it's a non-starter. But, I tried to be more authentic, saying like, here's my real experience in work. And nobody really cares, right? Nobody really cares about work itself. I think what people do care about is that sort of disconnect between work and reality. So we have our real selves. We talk. We go drinking with friends. We maybe go to a club. We maybe have hobbies that are beyond work, that we don't really talk about work. That colleague, that really straight-laced colleague who's like super management, and actually like every weekend they're doing cosplay. And you would never know, right? Because on their LinkedIn and their work persona, it's very like this, right? And so I like to play with that a little bit. And so I started doing a lot of anti-LinkedIn posts, a lot of sort of memes, a lot of sort of things examining sort of like the person behind the mask. I think TikTok really helped with this. There was a lot of content on TikTok. Corporate Natalie, I think, is one. I can't remember. He's one. Yeah. And what's his name? I can't remember. He sort of parodied agency life and so on and so forth. And so this strand of comedy, this strand of satire, and this strand of sort of like, I don't know, embracing the cringe almost, has really come to the fore recently, and I think it's great to see. I think LinkedIn unironically has a chance. We all thought it would be Threads that would replace Twitter, right? We always thought it was Blue Sky, right? or whatever the other one was, Mastodon, right? Or people were saying some left field things like, oh, it was going to be replaced by, I don't know, Facebook community groups or something. I heard that once. I'm like, okay, this isn't 2014. This is not going to happen. I genuinely think that LinkedIn, completely not by choice. LinkedIn does not want this. Microsoft does not want this. But I think LinkedIn is potentially looking to become a potential replacement for Twitter. I think we're not there yet. Maybe we'll never be there. But yeah, I genuinely think it is.
Talk to me about Ken Chang. As part
Yeah.
of the
Oh yeah.
research,
God,
I really wanted to understand you. And you were like, you've got to check out this guy. He's kind of what kickstarted a lot of this for me
yes.
and influenced the content boundaries that you push. How did you decide that you wanted to follow that and like follow the Ken Chang strategy of putting content on LinkedIn? Or is it like I'm okay to do it because he's okay to do it?
Yeah. Well, it's a bit of both, right? So when I look, for example, at Ken Chang, so I am quite a cynical person in general when it comes to work, right? I'm always like, I'm doing my job, I'm contributing, I'm getting stuff done, but there's a lot of fluff at work. Fortunately, not at Synthesia, right? Like Synthesia is genuinely, and I know this sounds like corporate PR bullshit, but it's true. Synthesia, the fluff is like at the very minimum, which is fantastic. It's just a perfect place for me, and I think it's a perfect place for a lot of other people, right? You don't have like 50 stand-up meetings a day and so on and so forth, which is wonderful. And so, I've always been super cynical when it comes to the fluff, right? And among colleagues that I know, appreciate that level of humor, I've always been like, like really, we need this meeting, okay, like a little bit of a sort of joke, like understand, but not really. Ken Cheng came along. It was like a breath of fresh air, right? Because he posted this extreme level of satire about I'm the CEO of a company and I always hire women because I like looking at women and stuff like this. Absurd levels of sort of like, I
It's
don't know,
almost ridiculous.
yeah, most ridiculous level of satire that's sort of I guess it's similar to sort of like Christian Bale's character in American Psycho, right? It's that level of sort of like absurdity and crassness and yeah, embracing the cringe. And really it was like a bomb going off on LinkedIn. I know that, some of those early posts he posted got like 5,000, 6,000 likes and people took them very seriously. He had the open to work circle on his profile, so it looked very authentic. Like it, and I remember seeing comments like, "I think you'll be looking for work for a while." And it was just a breath of fresh air. It really was. And so at that time I was like, yeah, well, fuck it, let's try and experiment with some satire myself. Let's push the envelope with some of these memes. Let's be a bit edgier, right? I think, people are real people. You talk to people in your office and they are sometimes very straight faced and so on and so forth, but people are more intelligent than we give them credit for, right? And also, people, I think, more than ever are aware that maybe this is the startup world, I don't know. But it just seems to me that people more than ever are aware that there's a lot of bullshit in the world, right? There's a lot of marketing, there's a lot of spin. And if you exaggerate that, if you parody that, if you play on that and you make satire on that, whether it's memes or satirical posts or LARPing or positioning yourself as sort of like an anti-LinkedIn person, you can really activate that, and it's become more acceptable to sort of go like, yeah, I'm a serious person, but also, this, some of this is bullshit, right? Like, we can agree.
Talk to me about how that translates into the real world. Obviously, you probably have friends and colleagues and peers on LinkedIn that you're connected with. Do they come up to you in real life and go, "Hey, that
They
was
do.
that was hilarious"?
They do. Yeah, they do. So yeah, people appreciate it, right? I think some of you have silent fans, right? So, people will say, "Oh, I love that meme. I thought it was hilarious." They'll say it in the office. They won't like it though. And the reason they won't like it is because they're still trying to maintain that professional image, right? And that's totally understandable. Maybe they have anxieties, maybe they have, maybe that's just not the way they want to use LinkedIn. Maybe they're interested in presenting themselves in a certain way for salary negotiations, or maybe for, getting another job or starting a business or whatever it may be. People I've known in my network, for example, but they appreciate them. I think LinkedIn is an interesting platform in general, in that you're going to get a tenth of the number of likes on a viral post that you get on Twitter, maybe even a hundredth. Like, you're not going to. I think one of Ken Chang's best performing posts maybe get like 7,000 people, but he's known everywhere, right? Like especially in the UK. Ken Chang is like, oh, like he's the goat. But maybe 6,000 likes on Twitter or whatever the reacts are now. I can't remember what they are. Uh, Maybe, that's not great. It's like, okay, cool, okay, good. But and so a lot of people are passively consuming the content on LinkedIn. The line is, yeah, it's a risk, right? I think if you're posting satire, there is something that could offend someone, like inadvertently. Say, for example, I try and think, like, okay, what have I done this week? Am I posting something which someone could inadvertently think, is this about me? Like, I'm mocking, like, for example, marketing's relationship with sales or something like that, and like, why is marketing always shit to sales and vice versa? Like, and I'm like, have I had a big conversation with sales this week and they could think this is about them? It never is. It genuinely never is. It's like general insights of like things I've seen or, exaggerated stances of what people have actually taken. But I think it's relatable nonetheless. And it's a risk. People could turn around and go, okay, that's a bit too much. But what are you going to do, right? I think it's risk versus reward. There's a very high level there's a very high threshold you have to cross to offend someone with corporate satire. I think Ken Chang sometimes really goes against that line, but that's also because Ken Chang I don't think is really in the world in many in many ways, right? He's sort of like he's a character, right? And whereas this is my personal profile. This is like you can find me liking company posts and saying like, "Great job, Sarah, you deserve that promotion," alongside some unhinged satire. So yeah, the line is a little bit. I try and keep away from the line as much as possible on my profile, but there is a lot of opportunity for alt accounts, I think, and that's really where the next opportunities are. Ken Chang style alt accounts of like totally fake CEOs that are just completely and utterly unhinged.
That's wild. When you think about it, it makes a lot of sense, right? You can build these fake characters on LinkedIn, and obviously they won't be verified, but you can have a lot of fun with that on the platform. And all we're doing here is just looking for attention. Like at the core, it's social, right? So we're just trying to signal, come towards me, come into this circle, let's fall into the feed. Talk to me about optimizing for entertainment on LinkedIn. Like what you do isn't optimizing for entertainment, but it's optimizing for attention, I feel sometimes. With not attention as the complete focus, but rather, okay, this is me. I know this is going to do well. I know this is going to perform in the capacity of it's going to come offline, from online to offline. When does optimizing for entertainment not work?
I think it's a bit of a crapshoot. LinkedIn has posted many articles about this, and I know you can never really trust it. It's like with SEO, right? Like what is Google wanting, and they'll post one thing, but they'll mean another, and so on. LinkedIn, however, is very old school tech. I think if you looked at LinkedIn under the hood, it would be barely changed in terms of algorithm and sharing stuff in feeds from 2015, right? I don't think they innovate much. I think if you, I mean, I've seen articles on LinkedIn, a developer suite, and so I can't remember where exactly. Sorry, the developer blog. I think about how LinkedIn makes content go viral, and it's the conclusion is pretty much we don't we don't have a viral thing. We don't have an algorithm. We don't really push content to make it viral. You might get stuff that's suggested, but really, if something goes viral per se, it's not because it's been bumped up in the algorithm to be presented to everyone. It's really just an effect of three people have liked this, and then other three people like it per three. It's the traditional virality, and so I think you have to go in. I do it for attention. I don't always do it to go viral. I think that's the thing. I genuinely do like LinkedIn as a platform, which is very sad to say. I really like the satire that people post on LinkedIn, and I think also the satire that people post on LinkedIn is quite highbrow. And I know that sounds snobby as hell, right? But it's sort of the stuff you would see on Reddit, maybe a little bit sort of like polished shit posting that you would get, that you used to get on Reddit quite a bit, and maybe like a little bit of that. And it's sort of like, that's clever. I like that. It took me a while to get it, but I like that. And so I don't always post with the intention of going viral. If I post with the intention of going viral, I never will, right? Some of the most popular posts have been like self-deprecating, but I don't think there's really a formula because again, LinkedIn isn't looking for this stuff. LinkedIn is not looking for memes to make go viral. If it's looking for content to go viral, I think it probably is. I think it's probably lying a little bit when it says it doesn't really. Like, it's looking for content to go viral. What's it looking for? Sam Altman, the Prime Minister of Sweden. I don't know, Meghan Markle. Like it's looking for the big hitters to go viral if it's showing you anything, right?
I want to switch gears. I want to switch gears slightly. Talk to me about hooks. You are obviously a god at email marketing, right?
Cheers.
And what have you learned from email marketing and applied to LinkedIn on how to win attention on?
Yeah. So email marketing, I went into copy originally years and years ago as marketing. Copy was my first sort of gig, and I pretty much wrote blog posts for SEO discoverability as if I were writing an essay, right? I'm fundamentally
Really?
a creative writer. Yeah. So I'm fundamentally a creative writer, right? And even in academia, which didn't serve me well in academia either, I like to make sure my stuff is interesting in bulk. But I'm weaker on the structure. I hate the idea of structure, the hamburger method or whatever it
Hmm.
is with making academic essays, or ADA, attention, interest, blah blah blah. I abhor that sort of stuff. But you actually need to do that, right? Like especially on a platform like LinkedIn, especially on email. If you don't follow some sort of structure, you're not getting the attention you need. It's a numbers game, right? You need to get as many clicks as possible. You need on that CTA, you need to get as high an open rate as possible. If you're not, you're leaving money on the table. And unfortunately, structure and strategy works really, really well. And one of the things which I've gotten really, really much better at over the past 3 years of doing email marketing at Synthesia is, as you say, the hook, right? I think the hook is essentially, well, I don't know. I don't know for others. Maybe others don't even know what the hook is, right? The hook is essentially like right at the beginning in your inbox. Oh shit, this email came from Cory. Like, are they going to respond like that? Are they going to be like, "What's this? Huh? What do you mean?" Or are they just going to completely ignore it, right? And I think one of the best ways to learn what a good hook is to look in your inbox itself and scan for everything which does not interest you, and then don't do that, or maybe even do the opposite of that, right? So I'm not going to name the company. It's a web communication platform where you can talk to colleagues, and the emails they always send out, they have terrible hooks, just absolutely atrocious, and just general terribly marked.
Why do you think? Why do you think that happens? Why do you think
Yeah,
we end up in that format of
because
because it almost feels as if an email marketing newsletter, whatever capacity it comes in, feels like an email.
yeah, yeah,
And
yeah,
it's just this boring slide that they've slapped on, or it's an image that's just there. And actually, I think Matt Lerner is one of my favorites. He writes his email newsletters like they're an email.
yeah, yeah. Be
And
relatable.
I open it
Tone
up
of voice.
every single time. It's hi Viraj. I know it's automated, but it
Yeah,
works a charm.
so good. Exactly. It's the tone of voice. It's approaching people differently. It's approaching people as they're not usually approached. People put this down whenever you're looking at a LinkedIn influence. They say, "Oh, people are time starved. People don't have time. You need to catch their attention because their attention is they've got so many different things to do." Yeah, but also equally, there's a lot of people who are bored out of their minds, right? There's a lot of people who are absolutely, at an enterprise company. Maybe they've been there 10 years, they've gotten pretty good at their job, they're pretty time optimized, and they're not working as much as maybe they used to. And they're really, really bored. And so if they're scrolling through their inbox and they're seeing the same stuff, they're not interested. If they see something which is, well, hang on, this actually might be for me. Someone actually personally reached out to me to talk to me. That's validating. That's something which is actually a little bit more honest, is a little bit more saying, I'm coming to you as a real person, and people want to be treated as real people. They want to be validated as real people, and maybe they're not getting that in their job. So fundamentally, I see it from a position. It's not correct all the time, but a lot of people are bored as hell. And so if you approach them as adults, if you approach them as non NPCs, right? Because I think there's an idea we have of a business person which doesn't match reality. Everyone's an
Hmm.
individual, going back to the sort of like corporate face, right? If you try and approach their internal motivations, if you try and approach their desire for validation, if you try and approach their desire for communication, for human connection, and so on and so forth, for genuine social experience, you can hook them in that way. And there's a number of ways you do that in a very short 5 words max, right? Like, hey, I saw this video, right? Something like that. All in lower caps. You know the hacks, right? You don't, or maybe all in full caps, although that's going to get spam
Is
filtered.
there arguably like a better way to do it in terms of does a normal sentence work better than just lowercase, or is it just you've got to
I
figure it
think I
out
think
what
it
works for
depends.
your audience?
Figure out what depends, and again, yeah, the audience depends how much they know you, depends whether you've talked to them before, depends whether there are a number of hacks I have. So for example, including first name, personalized fields. It's incredibly simple. You don't need to reinvent the wheel. So say for example, including personalized fields. Hey Viraj, have you seen this? Something like that. Or going absurdly low level, just 2 words, keeping it just to 2 words and a challenge as much as possible. Saw this or something like that. And also including an action verb as much as possible. Like if you know your ICP and you've done all the research and you know that this person is likely to have problems with headcount. You could literally ask something like halve the time you spend on headcount or something like that, right? Like it's not about necessarily catching attention, or that's a really important thing. It's speaking to their motivations, and their motivations are
So
not
it's almost like making them feel seen.
exactly making them feel seen, making them feel understood. Their motivations are not necessarily the company's motivations either. Like one of my favorite sort of regular hooks, and this isn't something I necessarily put in a headline, but it's something I might put in the body copy to keep people reading. It's like if you do this course, maybe your boss will be impressed. Maybe you'll get a promotion, right? Like that's not necessarily the company's interest. The company maybe doesn't want to promote this person, but if you dangle that carrot in front of them, their interests maybe are even opposed to the company, right? Make as much bonus as possible, get a better job, these sort of things, right?
How often does that work?
What do you mean? Oh,
How
it
often
works.
does that
It
hook
works really
work?
well. It works really well if you do it nuanced. So, say for example, one thing I found that really works well is certifications, right? So
Okay.
a lot of people with AI, you'll see a version of this in the wild, which is very annoying and irritating. So I think there is a line people often say like, master AI before, or you will lose your job to people who have mastered AI or something, some
Hmm.
variation of that. I hate that. I hate that insecurity, right? I hate the pessimism. I hate the constant need for competition and playing on people's anxiety. That's messaging I hate and try and avoid as much as possible. But what I do like is the idea like nudge nudge, like AI, maybe you don't know about it as much as you'd like, right? Here's a certificate. You can get it in 20 minutes. It's made by experts. 5,000 people have already done it. And once you do it, you'll get to share it on your socials, right? And this is a genuine certification we have called the Focus certification, which allows you to sort of master structure of a video. What makes a good video, the hook, and so on and so forth, call to action, and so on. And people love it, right? And you can do that in a headline, subject line of an email. You can go master AI video today,
Hmm.
that with a check mark emoji, and people are like, instantly they're like, okay, this works for me. I am on board. I want to upskill. I want to impress my boss. I want something I can share on socials. This is great for me. It's also good for the company, I guess, right? Like it's good for the company if everyone knows how to use AI video. It's good for us, blah blah blah. But really, it's good for the individual, right? They can turn around. They can have a side project. They have accomplished something. They've got that dopamine hit. They can share it on their socials. They can then use it in their CV. They can, say to colleagues, "Hey, look, I did this certificate. You can do it too." There's all number of wins that they can have personally in their career that make them feel validated, that make them feel like a real human being, right? And so speaking to individual motivations is really important, and it's one of the best ways to draw attention to things as well.
What do we miss? What do we misunderstand about hooks that you would know having written so many?
Yeah. What we misunderstand about hooks, people have great bullshit detectors. And so if you don't speak to okay, so say for example there's a great one, right? And the most bullshit hooks are the ones that get flagged by spam filters,
Right.
right? So say for example the re hook. I don't know if you know this one, right? Where you're looking at an email, and I'll get into another version of this in a minute. Say for example you and HubSpot won't let you do this. I don't think Pardot does either, right? But people used to do it all the time. They would literally go re colon our meeting, right? Oh, you didn't talk to this person before, right? You've never communicated with them before. And so what happens is you click on that if it manages to get past your spam filter, which I guess at one point it did. You click on that and you're like, our meeting? Hang on, I don't think we had a meeting. I don't know. Like, do we have a meeting? I guess we did. Like, that's a hook. You're getting the person's attention, but you're being rude, you're imposing yourself, and it's going to blow back in your face when they realize that they didn't have a meeting with you after all. People have tried to do this with me with the Google Calendar invite. Again, something which
Yep.
is high risk, right? They will put a meeting on your calendar, and looking forward to this, Cory. I'm like, did I talk to this person ever? I don't know. Rarely gets through because Google's like, okay, we know what this is, right? Like, but you've got to be a little bit more generous with your customers, your clients. I think it's sort of it can work, but come on. That's the sort of attitude, right? I think, you're just shooting yourself in the foot because you're not working on doing something which works long term. You're trying to get those short term wins. You're trashing your company name. You're trashing your individual reputation. You're annoying people. You're just not being a very social human, right? Like that's the, if you do stuff like that. And so yeah, I think the balance between have something interesting, sure. Speak to personal desires, yes. Bundle those personal desires and that interesting thing in as short and impactful way as possible in the subject line, ideally, right? Like the email, almost the body copy is like I don't know, a fourth of what you need. 75% of the hit of every email, every sort of pitch will be in that subject line, right? But also don't go so cynical that you're treating the person like a NPC. You're treating them like they don't matter, because then you've essentially, it's unethical, it's long term not working, and you have broken trust in many ways. And in an attention economy, right, when people are getting thousands and thousands of emails, they might not be super busy, but they're getting thousands of emails, you're wasting their time. It's not great, right? I think it's
Do you beta test some using your own LinkedIn, some of those email marketing hooks,
yeah, well, I think it's
or
just,
vice versa?
yeah. So kind of, I
Or
think
is it more the principles of the
it's more
hook?
the principles. It's more like the broad principles, right? And so, and again, I'm never consistent with this. I'm not someone who programmatically has like an Excel spreadsheet of 50 hooks and then chooses one and then A/B tests them and tries to find the best hook. Like that's never been me. Maybe I could do that. Would I get much of an uplift as opposed to just doing stuff like that? I don't know. I think there's a balance between, like, I remember reading a book recently by this really quite Edmund White, this quite famous autobiographical author, and he talks about how actually inspiration comes like that, right? You can't plan for it. So some of this best stuff he wrote in 5 hours on a flight. Like he didn't necessarily, but and then he's like, wow, this is great, but something he wrote spent 5 months on, really thinking about it, planning it out. William Faulkner used to just write his stuff, but then with his Nobel Prize winning novel, he wrote the plot on the wall of his house, right, on his study, and so he's like, I'm going to do this, and this, and is that book good? No. Right, it got him the Nobel Prize, but his other books are better that he just sort of wrote off the top of his head. And I think that creative spark is really important. So yeah, principles for sure. Again, going back to the lowercase, right? Using just lowercase, using crappy punctuation, making spelling mistakes, personalization, not so much, but you can sort of maybe do it, right? Just do something that's a little bit more authentic, a little bit different. One cool thing you can do is, if you're writing an email and you can be impersonal, and it's worth trying, I think, a lot of the time, look at the messages you send to your colleagues on Slack, right?
Hmm.
Are they super, structured? Are they super formal? Are they a little bit all over the place? Do they start with a hey and then 5 minutes later? People shouldn't do that, but that's another thing. Like you can learn a lot from the way you actually communicate with colleagues, because you're actually communicating with colleagues that way, right? I don't think you need to overthink an email. There are basic principles, yes, and you learn them and you list them down. But by and large, no, I'm not like copying stuff from subject lines that I have on email. I think it's just a subconscious learning, almost bizarre.
I see. This is a masterclass. Walk me through. You sent 14 million emails last year on
Mm,
with Synthesia, right?
mm,
And I just want to understand, why does email marketing work so well? Like, as a channel,
yeah.
why is it so important? And why does it have such a great open rate compared to other channels?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly that. So on a bad email campaign, we'll get like 20% open rate, right? And you think, oh my God, that means 4 out of 5 people haven't opened your email. But then you look at, I don't know, another channel, and it's maybe a 1% or a 0.5% open rate, right? I don't know, something like paid ads,
Hmm.
or LinkedIn in mails or something like that, right? Depends totally on your business and your ICP, but still, email, 6-year-old technology, has been there for ages. I think since the military invented it, the US military in like the 1960s or something like that, way before
You
the
know your history.
yeah, way before the internet, way before the internet was invented specifically for government comms, right? And so
Hmm.
that's the legacy of that, is that a lot of things we can't do with it. You can't embed video in an email, that sort of thing, right? Because I don't think they even had video in the original pre-internet age. Maybe they did. Maybe I don't know. I don't know
I
if
don't
they.
think so.
I don't think so. I don't think so. But maybe they did. And maybe it was like one video sent ever. No, like internet is. Sorry, email is an ancient technology, right? Electronic mail, why do we even still use it? That's a big question. People have tried to disrupt it. I don't know if you remember Google Plus. Do you remember Google Plus?
I do.
Google, was it Google Circle? Google Circle as well before that? I can't
I
remember.
think so, or it might
Something
have been
like that.
some variation on that. It was
Yeah.
terrible.
That the whole idea of that was to replace email, right? And just isn't happening. I think email, it just works. And it works because it can be quite personal, right? It's like you get a letter in your inbox. Cool, this is for me, right? And it hasn't yet been ruined totally by AI pitching, right? Like it is my personal space. And it's also something which, going back to, a lot of people being bored at work or needing a distraction or maybe wanting to break up the routine, getting an email, hearing that alert and going, actually, maybe I am important. Maybe, like that can be quite a sort of a good stimulus to actually engaging with the content as opposed to passively scrolling and maybe click on an ad. Whether that will be the case in the future, I don't know, but I don't know what to replace it, right? I think maybe a worldwide Slack like Google Circle was meant to be, but still, email just works. It's cheap, it's accessible, it has limitations, but what doesn't, right? I'm often
This is
reminded
true.
of like I'm often reminded of a episode of Star Trek, and I'm not a big fan of the newer Star Trek series, but it did get me into Star Trek, and one of the episodes revolves around the fact that someone tried a SQL hack to get into their computer system. So like the whole idea that SQL, which is, I don't know, again an antiquated technology, I think maybe from the 70s or 80s, database management, the fact that it will still be around in 300 years, yeah, some technology will, and I think email might be. So who knows?
Emails are, like you said, literally like getting a letter in your inbox. What are some of the best principles for what makes up a great email?
Be short. Be short and be shorter. I think so many people have emails that I often get guidelines from external emails. You can send emails with external providers that you'll get a conference and they'll be like, "Oh, send an email to our database." And it's okay,
Mhm.
and they'll say, "Oh, 500 words," and I'm like, "No, nobody's reading 500 words. I'm sorry. Like, maybe they will if it's a newsletter and they've specifically subscribed to it on Gothic literature and they'll read 500 words. But most of the time, people aren't reading 500 words in an email, let alone a promotional email. Short as possible. Like, if you can keep it to 10 words in the body of an email, you've got a brilliant email because everyone's going to skim that and they're going to be like, oh, okay, I get it. Cool. I want that. I don't want that. Right? Judicious bolding. So there's two ways you read an email. Sometimes, Viraj, you might be like, I'm super busy, I can't be bothered reading it. Other times you might read the whole thing, unlikely, but still, judicious bolding. And so you're like, do you want to get certified in this AI video certification course? And you'd have AI video certification course in bold. And then you'd be like, some people have already really, really liked it. Here's what they've said. Takes just 5 minutes in bold. So you're going like AI video certification course, 5 minutes. Do it here. I'll do it now. That
So
sort
you're
of thing,
telling
right?
you're telling a story in a story almost.
You're telling a story in a story, right? You're nesting essentially for different attention spans. And I'm not one to buy this thing that people have lower attention spans than ever before. They've always had these attention spans. But if they're not interested in something, if they don't know you, if you don't have that trust, and that's the case with 90% of email, you need to catch their attention really quickly and you need to give them the message really quickly and you need to be charitable with them and their time. I think that's it, right? And so, yes, you can have a PS that's a little bit more detailed for people who stick around, but you want to communicate really quickly in almost bullet point level, bullet point precision, right? Because again, you've got them to open the email, which in itself is the victory, right? You don't want to then lose them, throw away what is 75% of your work by having an email that's like 50 paragraphs long. Nobody's going to read that. Nobody's going to remember it. Nobody's going to share it with their colleagues.
Do you play with the difference between like a newsletter and then a normal email marketing campaign?
Yeah,
Do you
yeah.
play with the variations? So do you try a newsletter format in an email marketing campaign and then vice versa?
I think at Synthesia, I haven't really. I have before at different companies where the sense of community and the relationship between the customer and the company is much more important. At Synthesia, I haven't really, just because you need to keep it all around the core of one idea.
Hmm.
If you have, and this is part of the fault of being a writer, and if you give yourself the space to write 5 paragraphs of something, you will write 5 paragraphs of something, right? Like you need to give yourself almost artificial constraints to write a good email, right? There's that old I don't think it was Nietzsche, it was someone else, but I always bring it up, right? It's the one about I didn't have the time to write you a short letter, right? So the whole idea being that this person didn't have time, so they wrote a big long letter, right? So clarity, precision, a good hook, these things take a lot of time, and you need to give yourself artificial constraints to even get there in the first place. So you're like, right, I'm only going to have 3 paragraphs, absolute maximum. They're not going to be big. Let's just do that. And it actually takes longer to write a shorter email. I've tried newsletters occasionally, but it just, the voice isn't there. People don't care enough about Synthesia, I'd say, to read about Synthesia purely 5 paragraphs long. I never, for example, we recently raised our Series D, I think it was. Colossal, like 150.
It was nuts. It was absolutely incredible.
It's a massive one. It's and like huge valuation, stuff like that. And like I wouldn't have done this at the beginning when I started, or just been like, yeah, let's do an email. But this time I was like, no, we're not sending an email. We're not sending an email to say to people we've raised a shitload of money. Because going back to internal motivations, what is the win there? Right? What are we wanting from that? It's unclear. Okay, people know about we've raised money. What are they wanting from that? It's unclear. Why would people care that we've raised money?
How do you have that clarity of mind of the persona that you're talking to? Like, where have you curated that? Because that is not a nuance. It feels like it's at top of mind constantly in the way that you talk.
Pretty good. So the stakeholders at Synthesia are no BS people. I think that's really, really, really key. I think that's why it's one of the best environments that I can work in, because I'm also a no BS person, right? I've tried doing the politics. I've tried doing the sort of corporate LARPing.
It's horrible.
It's horrible, right? You've got, and I hate it. And a lot of people, even at Synthesia, I mean, the other day I heard, like, our CEO, Victor, he was essentially saying, like, I heard, it wasn't him saying it, was someone else saying it. When they looked for an office, they wanted somewhere that didn't have halogen lights. Even to that level of minuteness, sort of like, my God, halogen lights are awful. We don't want them we don't, they want to be like, they're not interested in necessarily building the next startup that does X, the next Uber, the next Microsoft. They're interested in building a company that's good to work for, that gets stuff done, that can move quite agile, that doesn't have like 500 people doing one thing. I'm the only guy at Synthesia that really does email comms, right? So like quite a big company now, 500 people, $2 billion valuation, all that sort of stuff. And I want to keep it that way as long as possible. Yes, we'll probably have a team eventually. Do I really want that? Well, I don't know if it speeds things up or slows things down, right? I really don't know. My workload at the moment is quite heavy, but manageable, right? And I don't necessarily want to have a big team for the sake of having a big team. And so this sort of ethos is throughout the company, right? I think a lot of people are like, their first question is why, and their second question is, but really? And I think that, if I just think from the basis of, who benefits, do we benefit? Okay, might be worth doing it if it doesn't annoy our customers. Does the customer benefit? Yeah, it might be worth doing it, but does it benefit us? Not really. Does the customer and ourselves benefit? Yeah. Okay, well, let's do it. But with stuff like a funding announcement, we'll do it on socials. We'll do it on, it's good to keep people in the know, but an email, you want to keep them, you don't want to be sending those all the time, right? Again, it's the hook. So if you send an email for a we've raised 150 million and nothing, we don't want you to do anything with that. Then you've lost a bunch of people from unsubscribes. It might only be 1%, 2%. Right, but you've lost a lot of people immediately from unsubscribes that you're never going to be able to pitch with email as a channel again. You've lost their attention. In some ways, you've lost their trust because you've gone and sent them a really corporate bloated email when they're expecting from Cory or Victor something that's a little bit more, oh, cool, this is a cool company, right? So there are lots of, the default position, I think, is why. Does this even need to be done? Does this even need to be sent? Is this meeting even necessary? Which I think is a great cultural thing that Synthesia does really well. And it's very unique, I think, even in tech.
Interesting. You talk about an unsubscribe moment there, right? What I'd love to know is when do you have a good unsubscribe and when is there a bad one?
I wouldn't say it's good or bad. I would say it's inevitable.
Really?
Yeah, I'd say it's inevitable.
So you expect anyone that subscribes to unsubscribe at some point?
Yeah, and I don't lose sleep over them, right? I watch a podcast based in the UK called Politics Joe. It's not a great podcast, but it's just an enjoyable sort of like political summary podcast.
Yeah, right? It feels like LBC that just moved to Spotify, right? Yeah.
And I remember them the other day talking about how they agonize over the fact that if they say something, they might lose subscribers, and they accept it now. They say, well, it's inevitable. We're always going to lose 10% of subscribers, and so on and so forth. And it's like, I would even go beyond that and say it's inevitable, but also you're getting new people in the funnel all the time, right? So Yes, it's not great when you lose a subscriber or a subscriber in both channel and email, same sort of thing. Yes, it's not great, but you're getting new people all the time. You can minimize the number of unsubscribes, but you're always, especially if you're taking risks, especially if you're taking an informal approach, especially if you're maybe sending them more emails than you should. We're releasing a lot of products, right? There's risk versus reward. So you're going to lose people, but you're also going to gain people. There was a time last quarter of last year, for example, we were sending maybe 2 emails a week to customers, potential clients. We shipped a ton of features, right? And so, yes, you can lose people to unsubscribe, but then if you've never emailed them in the first place, you've never invited them to an event, you've never communicated with them, well, you've lost them by default, right? So you're always going to get unsubscribers. Just accept it. I think email health. It's important to keep it below a certain level.
What is that level?
It's a little bit arbitrary. I don't think anyone really knows. I think it's ideally you don't want more than 0.5% unsubscribes per email send, right? Sometimes they've gone under, sometimes they've gone over. It's not something I'm really concerned about unless it goes beyond like the 2%, 3%, right? Then you've kind of fucked up on something. But there's risk versus reward for everything. You're going to alienate some people with your content. You can take measured risks and get benefits from those.
In a world where AI can generate endless copy, how does email change? Because when I think about the context of email, it is all pretty much copy most of the time.
Yeah, 100%.
Do you sit there and just riff with AI, or do you do other things?
I personally don't. I can see the benefits of using AI. Use AI. I use it more in a creative writing aspect, and I don't use it for suggestions as to copy. I don't use it as suggestions as to tone. I don't even use it in any way that's like actually creating anything. But I might provide it with a bit of my story and say, what do you think of this? And then it will go, this is good, or this isn't great. More likely it says this is good because ChatGPT is very positive, and that's nice validation, right?
And give it to Grok and see what happens.
Like for example, in one of my recent stories, I rely quite heavily on a twist, and I'm not quite sure if I'm signposting the twist enough. Like, you don't want to hit someone over the head with the twist, but also you don't want to like people to miss it. And so actually, I'll provide ChatGPT with the bit that has the twist in it, and it will go like, oh, I love this twist, and you're like, okay, so it's signposted. It's not just in my head. Fine. Something like that, for example. Like, then it was like, do you want any suggestions to refinement? And I'm like, nope, absolutely not. And the reason why. The reason why I never accept copy suggestions from ChatGPT or even rely on ChatGPT for copy beyond, I don't know, the most bureaucratic, mundane task is because it reverts to the mean. So the data set it takes from is the internet, obviously, right? Tons of emails that have been sent, it's tons of books, it's tons of everything. And what it does is it finds the most average corporate standard bloke you can imagine. Right? And it reproduces that, and it's because it doesn't really have a way of judging the quality level of an email, for example, right? And so if, for example, I were to rely on ChatGPT, I would be having an email that was 3 times longer than what I would usually send, because that's what most emails are. I would be having an email that was full of corporate jargon and cliches, which would alienate our audience a little bit more, maybe make them glaze over a little bit and not even get to the CTA. Yeah, the real problem I find with AI is not that it can't write an email. It can, of course it can, right? But that what it writes is the most email possible, and that's not what I want. I don't.
Makes sense.
I don't want to really send what emails other people are sending. I want to send emails that have Synthese's distinctive voice, right? Which is in many ways my voice. That is different from what emails they would usually receive, or at least a little bit more charitable with their time and treats them as real people.
You mentioned creative writing. What do you write?
Yeah, just short stories at the moment. So that's something that it's been my passion for a long time. I've not really had the courage to really sit down and write for a long time. But I'm getting into it. I've been getting into it over the past year or so. Really just writing short stories, and I think I've got to that stage of life where I've taken a lot of memories. So for example, I grew up in New Zealand, and when I was in New Zealand, the idea of writing about New Zealand to me was like, oh my god, unbelievably cringe, right? So if I were to, for example, like I'm like, oh, nothing happens in New Zealand. My God, I'm bored all the time. Actually, New Zealand's an amazing country, and this is just being a teenager, right? Like this is just being a teenager and going, I hate my hometown. But actually, as I've grown a bit older, I've been living in the UK. I've started to notice that like the similarities and differences between people everywhere, and so on and so forth. And so I've actually been like, oh no, actually, there's something interesting there. And so I've started writing a lot of short stories specifically about New Zealand, living in London, lots of LGBT themes, just a lot of different things. And again, I'm finding the same issues in my writing creatively that I have in email, LinkedIn posts. I think, obviously they're different mediums, they're different channels. One thing I really struggle with is structure and pacing. So where exactly should I put the hook? Where exactly should I put a point? Should I signpost this more? Should I not signpost this more? In terms of things like clarity, things like informal, things like tone, things like style, I think I'm pretty good at those, but the actual structure is where I suffer. And actually, I've got into this sort of thing now where my creative writing informs my emails, however strange that sounds, and my emails inform my creative writing. And that's a good place to be, I think. I think there are a lot of lessons you can transfer over.
How do you continue to build that feedback loop? Because if you don't release the writing, how do you know what works and what doesn't?
Well, that's exactly where ChatGPT comes in, right? Like I don't know what works. I do not know. Writing is such a lonely thing. I won't use ChatGPT for much longer. I don't think I've sort of got over that sort of step. I like starting out writing. I'm very much like, holy shit, like I'm screaming into a void. I have no one I can share this with, really. Maybe my partner or my mum. I have no one, and then, of course they're going to be super nice and so on and so forth. And I'm like, okay, well, is what I'm writing even good? Am I getting somewhere? Am I improving? Is it derivative? So on and so forth. And you can just essentially ask ChatGPT, like, what do you think the influences are? And it will say, and you'll be like, oh yeah, that's what I was going for. Or, no, that's not what I was going for. Or that's an interesting perspective, right? I almost use it like a dispassionate reader at the moment.
Nice. Okay.
Cool. I don't use any of its suggestions. It always tries to prompt you, right? Because that's what it thinks it is, right? And I guess that's what the intention is. It's like, I'll write this story for you, and I'm like, well, that's not what I want, right? I don't want you to write any of it. I don't even want your suggestions on this sentence could be improved if you put this word in. I do not want that. But if you say, oh, I think this is in the style of Catherine's Mansfield, and you'll be like, oh wow, not only is that validating, that's like, oh great, okay, that's what I was going for. Or so yeah, I think it can help with that. I think it's almost like people use it for, I don't know, Copilot, but even on a more higher level, just a reader. But again, you just learn, and you need to take that risk. So you submit things to competitions, you submit things to journals, wherever they are, and so on. But I do see myself getting better, fortunately, when it comes to structure, when it comes to plot, when it comes to the mundane stuff, which I don't like to think about, and I think is somewhat, sometimes in my most high horse moments, I think, plot, really, that sort of thing, right? But those things are really important. Otherwise, you just your stuff falls apart in a soup of adjectives.
What I'm learning here is that if you want to write great emails, creatively write.
Yeah, 100%. No, it's very true. I think just write in as many genres as possible, because again, different audiences, different needs. The people, you don't want to write. It could be interesting, I guess, if you wrote a short story like an email. Okay, cool. You could write the epistolatory novel. I've seen that done before. I hate epistolatory novels. That's you know what they are, right? It's like,
what are they?
So it's actually in New Zealand it's much more popular than I think here, and it just drives me insane. It's like the loved one during World War One writes to the soldier, and they write back and forth, and it's portrayed.
Okay, got it.
Hate it.
Surprisingly like them.
You like them? Yeah. No, I don't. I'm not a fan of those. I'm not a fan of that style. But again, that's pure structure, right? That's pure structure. And so I think if you write, like, there's a French creative writing collective called Oulipo, which is, I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right, but they've existed for a long time, for like 40 years, and their whole idea is like writing within artificial constraints. So, for example, writing the same scene 50 times over.
Okay.
Writing from the perspective of a dog. Rewriting, for example, maybe you'll take a traditional French novel, or maybe like, Spanish, Don Quixote, right? You'd take Don Quixote and you'd write it from the perspective of the donkey, right? Like these really weird writing experiments where you take something and you force yourself to write in a creative mode which is unusual to you, not usual to the creative world, and so on and so forth. And you learn a shitload through doing that, right? It's an artificial constraint. that just improves your other writing as well, and is fun for its own sake. And I think when it comes to email, a lot of creative writers could actually learn something, maybe not for very long because they're much more talented than I am, but they could learn something from trying to write for a commercial audience, trying to write, for example, a technical manual or a white paper, right? They would quickly learn, for example, that actually there is a way why I write creative writing this way as opposed to another way, right?
Mm-hmm.
There is a way, and it sounds incredibly boring and limiting, and that's the point, right? It is boring and limiting to write a white paper, especially for someone who's used to writing very, very articulate and full of style short stories, for example. But that's the point, because you realize what you're not doing and what you're doing in different channels. And so I do genuinely think that commercial writing is still very valuable, and I don't think it's going to be replaced by AI. I mean, some cases, yes, it is, right? Depends on the business need. But if you want quality level writing, if you want people to genuinely open and engage with your emails, AI isn't necessarily the first place you go, right? It is being unusual, it is being strange, it is speaking to people's personal desires. It's not speaking to what other marketers think is someone's personal desire. I think that's
When you think of the roadmap for email and what you're planning in the next year, what you're planning in the next 2 years, what do you think changes in the next 5?
I used to again think AI. I think there are fundamental limitations. I'm an AI skeptic to begin with. So I think there are fundamental limitations to LLMs, large language models, and the specific AI that's built off the back of large language models when it comes to hallucinations, when it comes to, for example, AI agents are just sort of like crashing at the moment because they don't really work. And there's a number of reasons why they work, because human minds work on this level of nuance that they don't quite have. I don't think we're going to get replaced by AI. I think AI as an assistant works really, really well. Going back to like creative writing, that sort of thing, but for email can be really powerful. I have talked to a company recently, well, actually a year ago. They launched a great product where essentially it will write an email for you, a sales email with this specific tone, and you can direct it and so on and so forth, and it will spit out a sales email and so on and so forth. I suggested to them actually that you should have a weirdness scale, right? like how unusual do you want this to be? Like
Probably a better indicator.
yeah, because again, you're not necessarily writing an email for the sake of writing an email. This is where a lot of people go wrong. They hire comms people because they expect people to have a comms tone of voice, and they need comms, as opposed to what does this comms do? Why send this fundraising announcement? Why send this email? One of the most hated emails I always get, and I can understand the necessity from a corporate perspective, but it's completely irrelevant to a client perspective, is when a company is bought out by another company and they will say, "We are now X company." I'm like, I do not care. You care because you want me to keep using your website. Okay, cool. Give me something else. Give me something like, and since you are a long customer, sign up here for our event and we'll send you a free plushie. Who knows? You know what I mean? Like, why should I care? Why should the customer care? Why should the company care? Comms for the sake of comms is just terrible. It's like, no, do not do that. Do not do comms for the sake of comms.
Do you go out and ask the audience of the emails that you send, like, what's your perspective?
Not really. I think I learn a lot from what the product marketing team does. So the product marketing team at Synthesia is really, really strong. It's these about several people now who go around specifically interviewing customers. So they will reach out to customers individually, and this won't be for content creation purposes. This will literally just be for like, why are you even here? And the director of brand marketing at the moment, Dan Vlad Kobasno, same apologies, Dan. He is fantastic at listening, and so he will have a structuring question where we like, why are you here? Like, why are you a customer? Like, he won't put words in anyone's mouth, and they'll just talk, right? They'll talk, and they'll come up with the most. I don't know if it's Dan's demeanor or Dan's interview style, but they'll come up with the most unhinged stuff imaginable, which is what's really inspired me. So they'll say things like, I'm not naming any names, but they'll say things like, I've been in my job 20 years, I've seen it all. I get 6 pitches a day. The reason I'm talking to you is because I'm genuinely interested in Synthesia, and here's why. Right? Like, they won't, or they won't go like, And so if you just talk to people and treat them as human beings, you get a lot of insights from those emails themselves. And people tend to have similar motivations. Say, for example, L&D, low budgets, right? They're not considered necessarily a revenue generator in the company. They're considered a cost sink. It's not true. but a lot of companies they are, right? And so they'll have constraints as to headcount, they'll have constraints as to their actual budget, they'll have constraints as to the skills that they have. Maybe they're one person managing 50 things and they don't have time to make a video, right? And so you'll learn a lot of the individual motivations that the person has, as opposed to the corporate motivations, from this really generous collection of user interviews, user feedback.
What do you do with them? Do you sit there and just like look at them all and go, right,
I do.
a little bit of this, a little bit of that. We're going to throw that in there this week.
I do. Absolutely. 100%. Yeah. I look at them. And so, you can use a bunch of AI tools for this, but essentially like we summarize all of this into insights. And so I can literally go to a tool like Dovetail and ask, based on this extensive research we have that's made by the product market team, what do you think really motivates L&D people working in fast food? And it will say, it'll spit out Dovetail, which is fantastic. It will spit out a bunch of different, by and large, from what people have talked about in fast food, so-and-so at so-and-so says this, so-and-so at so-and-so says this, but the consistent theme is this. Here's a few clips that you can see, and you watch the clips, and you're like, okay, interesting. And so it's just, I think, always going back to personal motivation. Why is someone using your software, as opposed to why is the company using your software, is a great place to start from. And we have a lot of information at Synthesia that sort of says that. I think if I were to ask, I often see, well, not often, I sometimes see in emails, how did you find this email? And it's like 3 emoticons. It's like frowning, neutral, or smiley face, right? And it's kind of like, what's the incentive for anyone to say how they found the email, right? You can't ask someone how they found this bizarre corporate newsletter, right? People aren't going to answer honestly, and the people who do answer, is their perspective really worth it, right? Like, who would answer that? And so you kind of just need to intuit a lot of things from other customer research that people have done, and Synthesia is again really, really strong at that, which is fantastic.
Synthesia sounds like they've got their head screwed on really well. Cory, I want to wrap up and I want to throw you some quick fire.
Yeah.
Just off the top of the dome, your thoughts. Best email you've ever sent. What was the hook?
My go-to is very much certification. So I focus certification. The hook is get. So it's again action word. Master AI video. So and so name, first name, right? So master. So like master AI video Virage. Sometimes a question mark. Sometimes just a statement, right? Check emoji. It's like straight away. What can I get from this? This is going to give me a dopamine rush. I know exactly what I want to do with this email. I know what it's trying to say to me. Oh, and shit, I can share this on socials. That's fantastic, right? I'd say that's my popular go-to is to actually give someone something that they can take away straight away and have an achievement for the day. And that's probably my favorite email so far that I've sent at Synthesia, I'd say.
Worst.
That's the worst?
The worst.
Yeah, the worst. Again, right at the beginning when I first started Synthesia, I sent like a year in review email. And again, like I was asked to do this by someone in the team. They were like, we should send a year in review article. And at the time I was very much like, no pushback. I was like, okay, let's do that. And it got called out quite publicly, right? It was like, why are we sending this? Like, like what's the point? What's the hook? Why is this even going out? It's super long. It's super pointless. It's just kind of junk. And yeah, that's probably the worst email I've sent to Synthesia. It's like, why even bother? Year in review article, year in review email for the sake of a year in review email. There's no point, right? I think if there's some really real awesome takeaways that you've got for the customer, cool. But if there's not, then don't do it.
What's the most valuable lesson from your anti-LinkedIn stance?
I think embrace the cringe. The cringe only exists if you give it power. So even posting on LinkedIn in the first place is a very cringeworthy act, right?
That's a fact.
Yeah, I think if for example you think of your friends at school, nobody would appreciate someone who posts on LinkedIn. That would be incredibly cringe. But you just got to embrace the cringe into it, because in the cringe there is a lot of opportunity, right? There's a lot of opportunity for self-improvement. There's a lot of opportunity for understanding your level of humor, your level of understanding, your creativity. If you don't take risks, you don't get anywhere. You just stay in your lane, and that's not cringy, but cringe is a good thing to embrace, I think.
Is there a point where the anti-LinkedIn approach becomes so popular that it requires an anti-LinkedIn approach? And what happens after that?
Yeah, inevitably it will. Yeah, there'll be a counter-revolution, right? Where people are like, can we just go back to a platform? You're actually seeing that a little bit on LinkedIn Lunatics, which is a subreddit that I'm a big fan of. I think I shared it with you in our original.
I've spent a deep dive in there. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, so fun. You're seeing a lot of people post on there specifically satire from LinkedIn. like Ken Chang style posts, and actually a lot of people revolted against that because they're like, that's not real. And so you're already starting to see these turns, right? Originally people appreciated the satire, now they're not appreciating the satire. They're wanting the genuine, real, crazy people, you know, of which LinkedIn still has a plenty, right?
Yes.
And so you're already starting to see a little bit of revolt against satire and memes on LinkedIn and so on and so forth. It's just playing the field, right? It comes and goes, and adapting, and maybe just not posting for a few months as well, you know?
In 10 years' time, when we're thinking about how we receive comms, do you think email's still the norm?
Yep, I do. Yeah, I really do. I don't know why. I think it speaks to that personal space we have for communications. And this can go to things adjacent to email as well, like DMs, right? DMs on Twitter, although I hope Twitter doesn't exist in 10 years. But people want a personal space they can communicate with people, right? And I think whether that's an Instagram DM box, whether that's email, whether that's LinkedIn email, whether that's something entirely different, that's wired straight into your brain. I don't know. People want that personal space for communication one-on-one. And I don't see another technology really replacing email on that.
Cory, this has been an absolute pleasure. I honestly didn't expect it to go down the roads it went down. I was taking it in a different direction, but I'm so glad it did, because this has been a masterclass.
Yeah,
I appreciate your time.
It's been really fun. It's been really fun talking, and I really enjoy these things because I tend to reflect on a lot of what I've done and learn something from, again, structuring it in a maybe semi-coherent way while talking to another person. So thank you so much.